Now, after announcing her departure from the Democratic Alliance on Thursday, Mbali Ntuli has joined the growing list of black leaders who've left the party in recent years. Some notable departures include Herman Mashaba, Patricia de Lille, Mmusi Maimane, Lindiwe, Mazibuko, John Moody and Phumzile van Damme, to name a few. Ntuli leaves the party after 15 years of service in various capacities. Now, in 2020, she ran against DA leader John Steenhuisen in the party's leadership election, where she threw a wrench in the DA's succession plans. She claims that South Africa's current political structure and parties are not focused on making South Africa the equal and just country it needs to be. Joining us to discuss this further is the Deputy Vice-Chancellor from the University of Fort Hare and political analyst Oscar van Heerden to talk to us about this. Very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. Ntuli joins that growing list of prominent black leaders leaving the DA in a bit of a hurry. But before we get there, let's listen to some of the remarks Mbali Ntuli made with my colleague Golim Gambi throughout the course of this week.
I think it's been just a combination of some deep introspection and whether or not I think that political parties, and certainly the way my political party is structured at the moment, is able to tackle some of the problems that we see in South Africa. There's a rigidity to the political party system that I think doesn't allow any longer, because of the lack of imagination and innovation, for people who have out-of-the-box thinking, diverse views on how they want to do things. And I felt constrained. And I haven't just only complained about it. As you said, I tried to put my hand up to say that I'm not going to whine about what I think the issues are. Here's what I think we should do, and I'm putting myself and I'm availing myself for that. And that hasn't been successful, and that's fine, and that was 2 years ago. But I think for my own personal growth as a leader, and wanting to really be able to tackle some issues that are happening that I see around me, it's become time to take another direction, I think. And so I'm looking forward to going back to different types of communities and working with them. And in a few weeks, or maybe a month or so after I take a break, I'll be coming back to say exactly what that is. But I want to answer the question of how can ordinary South Africans who are fed up with the political party system, are fed up with not feeling that they have any kind of advocacy, agency around what happens in the country, tap into it. So I want to go and find that answer, and I want to be part of building that.
There you have it, Mbali Ntuli speaking here on Newzroom Afrika during the course of this week. Let's get now some analysis from Deputy Vice-Chancellor from the University of Fort Hare and political analyst who joins us to talk a little bit more about some of the remarks that we heard there from Mbali Ntuli. Very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time, Oscar van Heerden. We listened to some of the reasons put forward, and of course looking at the trend that we've seen over the past few years, black prominent leaders leaving the DA. Mbali Ntuli says she felt constrained. Was this one coming?
Good morning, Paul. The thing is that I'm sure on a personal level, all these black leaders that was in the DA have their reasons for why they are moving on. But I do think that if you look at it holistically, two things I would argue potentially informs their unfortunate decision to move on. The one is an ideological one. I think that a lot of black leaders who come into the Democratic Alliance come with all sorts of ideas, wanting to do change, as Ntuli is saying, working in communities and so forth, only to be confronted with a party that is putting much more of an emphasis on the market, on meritocracy, and unfortunately, a clash then happens where they are finding the contradiction, where a meritocracy actually can't answer systemic inequality in a country such as South Africa, where blacks have been systematically excluded, have been divided, have not been given opportunities. And when you talk of policies that is talking against affirmative action, saying that you need to be promoted or you need to be advanced based on merit, then there's that clash that says, how do we actually begin to really address inequality in a country such as ours. And I think so ideologically, I think there's a bit of a contradiction. And then secondly, I think a lot of the black leaders get to a point in the party, and we've seen this, where yes, you do reach certain levels of leadership, but the party has got an identity crisis. An identity crisis in the sense that for the Democratic Alliance to effectively become a political party of substance in South Africa, it will have to be a majority black party. This is just a foregone conclusion. I mean, you have to have the majority of the citizens of South Africa being involved and supporting your party. And unfortunately, every time it seems when they get to that tipping point, they go into an identity crisis, they go back into their lagers mentality and identity politics, to a point where they even decide to bring back Helen Zille when they are in a time of crisis.
And that really speaks to some of the reasons why Mbali Ntuli has quit the DA. She made mention of not wanting to be in a position where she's constantly calling the party out, and also not wanting to answer questions about things that she might perhaps disagree with, really speaking to some of the reasons why this move was crucial for her.
No, exactly. You know, you get to a point where, on the one hand, Gibson tries to insinuate that Ntuli was just wanting to be the leader, wanting to have high office within the DA. But the fact of the matter is that when you are constantly, as you say, having to fight for particular positions, having to, what you think is obvious, argue those points, and constantly getting this pushback, that you do get frustrated. You do then realize and start questioning, am I in the right party? Am I doing the right thing? Is this what my political career was all about when I started at such a tender young age of 19 at Rhodes University?
And she did aim for high office in the DA. We saw it all playing out in 2020 when she ran against John Steenhuisen for the position of DA leader. And her campaign was grounded on the premise of let's save the DA so we can save SA. And, of course, the outcome clearly pointed to a different take when it comes to the vast majority of the inside of the DA when Steenhuisen secured 79% of the vote.
No, indeed. And you know, the truth is that the DA needs to ask some serious introspection, some serious questions. You have a person in the character of Herman Mashaba, was never really a DA member, but got convinced and recruited to come in to the party, run the city of Johannesburg. And for a person like that, to have such a short stint in the DA and decide to resign and move on and form his own party, I think there are huge question marks. What happened there? Why did a person like Mashaba decide to leave the DA? Why was it not a political home? And then, of course, also Mmusi Maimane. I mean, the names that you've mentioned at the opening of your segment, these are people of integrity. These are good leaders. Maimane, we all thought was going to be a good leader for the DA, and for him to get to a point of saying, no, this is not working, I have to move on. I think there is some serious questions to be asked, and some serious introspection. I mean, you look at the Federal Council, which is predominantly still white. There was an opportunity after Maimane to really continue with a good trend of having a black leader post Maimane. They decided to go for John Steenhuisen. They brought Helen Zille back and retracted back into their traditional mode and their traditional support base. I don't think, one of the things that I think no one is talking about is that I don't think the DA is interested in actually governing South Africa. They are interested in wanting to secure and make sure that a particular segment of society is protected and that their prospects and aims are advanced. And I think this is what a lot of black leaders in the party is struggling with.
Before the break, you were making mention of the DA's interest, that they're wanting to secure and ensure the protection of a certain sector, of a certain race, perhaps, when it comes to the idea on politics. And we actually saw a bit of this quite recently when the DA took its own stance on the Ukraine-Russia issue, which was very different to what President Cyril Ramaphosa had said.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, it is perhaps a controversial point, but I do think the more I look at the DA, the more I realize that I'm not entirely convinced that the DA is actually interested in wanting to govern South Africa, in wanting to lead South Africa, because every time they are supposed to just move beyond that point of becoming a majority black party, majority black leadership, who still, remember, these are black leaders that have bought into the idea of liberalism, have bought into the idea of wanting to embrace the policies of the Democratic Alliance. So it's not as if they are under a misunderstanding of what their role is. But they do come into the party, I would assume, wanting to make a difference and wanting to take the party to become a real opposition, which is to try and unseat the governing party, the ANC. And I think that every time they get to that particular precipice, it just doesn't happen.
You also spoke about how you think that it's important for the DA to ask itself some really serious questions and perhaps introspect on its identity and ideologies. And looking back to 2019, Mbali Ntuli wrote an article where she speaks about how the DA needs some form of internal healing because the damage that has been inflicted on the party over the past few years has been rather significant. She made mention of the recent analysis of the DA pointing to a picture of a purging of senior black leaders, also saying that there seems to be some form of clique, a cult-like behavior associated with big personalities within the party, which is something that she says is really problematic.
No, the thing is that it was quite evident that once the DA decided, and it was under Helen Zille's direction and leadership, that the party took the correct decision to say that we need to open up, we need to begin to recruit blacks into the organization, and indeed we need black leaders. As they were doing that and as the party was growing and making an impact, they were losing some of their white supporters. It was very evident in the last elections where a lot of white Democratic staunch supporters were beginning to vote for the Freedom Front Plus. These are what the stats showed us. And they went into panic mode. This is when they decided they need to bring Helen Zille back out of retirement, they need to realign and so forth, and try and bring back that constituency into the fold of the Democratic Alliance. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with those strategies of wanting to make sure that you keep your support base, that you keep your traditional support base and so forth, but you don't do it at the expense of others. And I think that it was quite evident that the party went through an identity crisis where it was beginning to get worried that if indeed we continue on what I think was the correct trajectory, which would have given them more membership, which would have taken the organization much further, they decided to pull back and go for their traditional base. And some of those supporters have now come back from the Freedom Front Plus, back into the fold of the DA. But the question that must be asked is, at what expense?
Absolutely. The other point that has also been raised, or perhaps been quite evident in the public space, is the politicization of the DA's Federal Legal Commission. Mbali Ntuli also made mention of this, saying that she sat on the FedEx and saw members who had their membership terminated for failing to pay their subscription or tithe offerings or whatever the case may be over 3 months as per the DA's constitution. Yet she saw chief whips and some senior leaders within the DA get away with no penalty or no termination of their membership for failing to pay the same fines.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that the DA has always prided itself in being a ratepayers organization. They serve ratepayers. In other words, they as a principle, advocate that you pay according to the services that you get. Nothing wrong with that, of course. And I would imagine the same principle holds within the party. You know, if you want to be a member, if you want to have a say, if you want to have a vote, then you must pay. You pay your membership. The problem with that, and I think this is the point that Ntuli is possibly making, the problem with it is that there is simply no understanding or appreciation for the financial position that the majority of black South Africans find themselves in, historically. And so even a small thing like organizational membership, it's a fee that must be paid monthly, and sometimes not all of the members can afford to do that, or they have choices to make as to what do they do with the little they have this particular month. And if it is between putting something on the table in terms of food and the membership to the DA, they will obviously go for the first option. And I think this is what Ntuli is saying she's struggling with, that there's no appreciation and understanding, perhaps, of that particular issue.
Yeah, and perhaps the double standards, that how can chief whips and other senior members get away with not paying and not being penalized for it, also pointing to the divisions within the party as those who can afford and those who can afford not being held liable for not paying, and those who can't simply being chopped off. The elections, as we take to the elections, national elections coming up, where do you see the positioning of the DA, and what sort of message will the party be sending out?
Well, I mean, I think that the party knows that it has lost quite a bit of confidence in black voters. Of course, there's still support out there. But the truth of the matter is that the DA is going to find it very difficult to try and convince ordinary South Africans that they still very much in pursuance of their non-racial character. I think that at the moment, if you look at the analysis of our elections, it is most unfortunate that people are withdrawing back into their lagers, religious types voting more and more for religious parties, white South Africans voting more and more for traditionally white parties such as the DA, Freedom Front Plus, and so on, the conservative vote. Everyone is sort of just pulling back into their little lagers. I hope it won't get to a point where we begin to see narrow nationalist tribal organizations like the IFP and others coming back into the fray. That would be unfortunate, because I thought that we were making good progress, including the DA, in actually beginning to amass a non-racial character where people feel that they can vote across political lines and so on. And so I think that the DA have in a way cemented their traditional base, which is white. I think that people are having more confidence in the leadership under Alan Ziller and John Steenhuisen. And so I think that they will still lose votes, not because of any other reason, but our democracy maturing and less people coming out to vote and participate in the democratic project. But I don't think that there's going to be a significant number of black South Africans that will come out and vote for the Democratic Alliance.